I've seen countless videos on YouTube shitting on Star Wars and Marvel movies, and I found myself doing the exact same thing. So I decided to try something new. This video was originally going to be me watching The Lord of the Rings for the first time and my fresh thoughts on them, but then I didn't really like them as much as I thought I would, so here we are. These will be my unedited notes while watching the movies, so as to give my thoughts before I can go back and change them to give it a very authentic take. If you are wondering, no, I did not watch the extended versions, I'm not that crazy, and I will also be rating these films out of 100 so I don't look like a complete idiot while giving them a much lower score than most people. I'd also like to mention that I will pronounce most of the places, names, and special items completely wrong, so do not get angry at me, nerds. And without further ado, let's get into the bad taste. First, I must say that the opening montage is pretty sick. It's a nice and thorough introduction to the story and characters, though the beginning does get off to a bit of a rough start. It was strange and boring and felt like a completely different movie. I also didn't like how Sam was both literally and figuratively thrown into the plot. Gandalf just thinks he's eavesdropping and is like, oh, you can go on the run with Frodo. I'm not sure if that's what happens in the book too, because I haven't read it, but as it is, that is a pretty weak way to introduce us to Sam. The same thing happens with Pippin and Merry. They literally fall onto Sam and Frodo while hiding in a corn maze. Or just some really tall plant. Listen, I don't know what they grow in these movies. Although the plot hasn't fully taken its form, I can still admire the interesting shots. In action movies, it's usually just medium close-up, shot, reverse shot. But here, there is a consistent zooming out and long shots and some very cool editing to represent the ring's power. I also know this is pretty obvious, but I really love some of the visuals. Whenever the film introduces a new place, they usually do an establishing shot, but instead of jumping straight into a cut, they use a far zoom, which is really fun to watch. So far, my only gripe is the acting. Almost everyone is doing a great job, but when someone is underperforming, you can tell, and it is pretty silly. I think Aragorn's character can be so overacted sometimes, and for the most part, Gandalf is fine, but sometimes he is so cheesy. Like when Saruman closes the doors and Gandalf continues to try the other doors. I don't know what else he's supposed to do in this situation, but it's moments like these that really take you out of the experience. The welcome to Rivendell scene is so beautiful. It's like looking at a painting, and you can really tell they put a lot of effort into it. Unfortunately, near the 1.5 hour mark, you can really start to feel its length. They just decided on the journey, and it's more than halfway in. This scene is also pretty cheesy. It's the stereotypical, I'm coming too movie trope. But once the journey starts, the movie picks up the pace again. A great time to mention that this is one of the best scores I've heard in a long time. It's never so quiet as to be unhearable, but never distracts from what's going on. It perfectly emulates tension in the film, and even enhances it. The visuals, while sometimes beautiful, feel very 2000, which can make it feel campy and fun, but make scenes like The Water Watcher much less intense. I'm sure for the time it was great, but now it could be better. I think the fight scenes aren't too well choreographed, and they didn't feel special in any way. Similar to Luke in A New Hope, Frodo is kind of a whiny little shit. He doesn't save or help anyone. Everyone acts like he's more important than he is, and he gets stabbed twice in the same way and whines about it for a while, and then is inexplicably fine like 2 minutes later. And once the stakes were raised, I really didn't care. Not because I was bored, but because I didn't feel any connection to the characters. I know that the characters aren't supposed to be like the best thing in these movies, but when you can't connect to any person in this movie, it makes the emotionally heavy scenes much less effective. It's also just 3 hours of setup, and it's obvious that more will happen in the next film in the series. I just wish it was less conversation of the ring and more journey. My favorite thing is probably the world building. I can really buy all of the sets and landscaping, but right after that compliment, there is another very silly scene. It's when Frodo is on a boat sailing away from Sam, and then Sam starts swimming towards him even though he knows he can't swim, and then Frodo starts to come back and like screams Sam, and then saves him. And I know this is supposed to be like an important part for their friendship, but to me it just came off as really silly and trying to be emotional, but just coming off as very stupid. But then 1 minute later, the credits roll. I know a lot of you are going to hate me for this, but I think this one is a 6 out of 10, or staying true to what I said in the beginning about a 100 score, a 63 out of 100. I really don't see what's so special about this movie. It felt like every time the adventure starts up, it gets interrupted by the bad guys catching up, or someone being a dumbass for no reason, and then it doesn't amount to anything later on. I can see why so many like it, but this one is just not for me. Well, 6.5 hours to go, I guess. This is a film that introduces us to Gollum, the Jar Jar Binks of the Lord of the Rings movies. I will say he is a lot less annoying than Jar Jar and also has better CGI than I expected. That said, the orgs still aren't looking too good. It does feel like more of a journey with less interruptions and better built characters. The storyline with Gollum is fascinating, and without a doubt the most interesting character so far. They go through a variety of different challenges, and they are all important and fun to watch. The rest of the Fellowship, including Merry and Pippin, also have a fun plotline. This is the battle storyline, and has a completely entertaining story to watch. The battles, while being somewhat less interesting due to the lack of professional choreography, I will say, they still remain to be a very fun battle. The worst plotline is later with Pippin and Merry, and of course, the trees. It is boring, the actors playing the pair are awful at showing actual emotion, and are constantly just bewildered by everything going on. I really wish these two were not in the movie. They just bring it down so much, and I don't think anyone gives a shit about the trees. Like I said, the CGI for Gollum is really great for its time, but these tree shots are hard to look at. And although intended, the blocky movement of them makes it feel so robotic when trees are, nature, not to mention the terrible green screen behind them. It is so painfully easy to see, and it takes you straight out of the film. Like the first, the setting and landscaping are by far the best part. Many shots of the kingdoms and battles are so filled with detail, and it really shows you the scale of the films. But apparently, you can't have one of these movies without some silliness, which this film definitely has. Grima Wormtongue has some of the worst written dialogue I have seen in a while, and reminds me of Igor from Young Frankenstein. It is never a good sign when a character from a serious adventure movie reminds you of a character from a parody film. That aside, the score still goes really hard. It's no Interstellar or There Will Be Blood or Arrival, but it is one of few scores I would consider listening to after the movie. 2 hours in, the film takes a bit of a dip when the characters are imprisoned and almost nothing happens, and it takes a while to get going again. The big battle not too far after that is amazing and is still very stressful, but you can tell they put a lot more effort into it than the others. But then, it's just interrupted by more tree shit. Why? I get that they become important later, but I could not care less, and it doesn't help that they are wasting 30 minutes trying and failing to convince these trees to do something that barely even helps the plot. If they're gonna just sit around and be trees and not help in the battle, then just leave them alone and stop repeating the same points over and over. There is a long 40-minute period where all of the storylines, even the ones that are interesting, just mutter out. Frodo and Sam are kind of just waddling around as prisoners, and the battle is just kind of over. The trees are even taking Merry and Pippin home. Everything's just done. That's something that keeps happening in these films when I'm getting my hopes up about it being as good as people say it is, and then it just gets way less interesting so fast. But boy was it worth it, because the ending is insane. The tree sees his dead tree friends, and as a result of the war, he just decides to gather up the trees and start helping. Frodo freaks the hell out, which to be fair is kind of just the series so far, but then Sam gives a great speech that is a fantastic way to end the film. The orcs are defeated, and that's a nice way to end this movie. Well, that was certainly better than the first. I'd say this one is like a 74 or a 75 out of 100. Let's keep going, I guess. 10 minutes in, it's already way better than the first two, where now we get to see Gollum's backstory, which is very disturbing. I will not spoil it, as it's a very good scene, but let's just say it's a pretty clear transition. I always thought Gollum was the most interesting character, and they finally gave up the best part about him. His physical transition to Gollum could be better, but it isn't ugly enough to distract. Then there's a scene with Gollum talking to himself, and although nothing crazy, I found it interesting how the camera kept changing from him to his reflection in the water to show his multiple personalities. Not too long later, there's a fantastic scene with Pippin and the Palantir, where it shows the effect of magic, and so far it feels that no time is being wasted. The river battle, while not at the same level as the last one, is still tension-packed and interesting. You can see how the orcs have gotten better CGI-wise since the last one, and the conflict between Sam and Gollum is fully believable and extremely effective. The storyline with Pippin seems unnecessary, and I was really hoping that there would be none of that in this movie. I wouldn't call it filler, but they always have one plotline that I couldn't give less of a shit about. The score is extremely intense in this movie and is the best it's been so far. The Cave of Ghosts scene is very atmospheric, and the Great Battle of the Orcs is incredible. How they just keep one-upping themselves until they attack the biggest human kingdom is so fun to watch. They catapult human heads over the wall. Didn't think a PG-13 movie was gonna go there, but here we are. I do think it's pretty stupid that Frodo didn't realize that Gollum is trying to take the ring for himself until Gollum leads him into a literal death trap. Though the spider scene is absolutely fantastic with great choreography, a realistic looking spider, and very high stakes. Then they introduce the elephants, and boy do these guys look absolutely fantastic. The scale is perfect, the color in CGI doesn't feel out of place, and it is the best use of CGI so far. The battle is super fun to watch, but I also enjoyed Frodo and Sam's journey way more. It always keeps me on the edge of my seat and has the most variety out of the three storylines. The volcano scene is mind-blowing, and I was not expecting what happened at all. Don't worry, I won't spoil it. And then the movie is over, and the problem is resolved. Everyone happy. Only problem is that all of these long movie series think they have to do a 40-minute epilogue. I like happy endings too, but Jesus Christ, you don't have to show us every character being happy. I do not care. This is still the best installment in the franchise, and I think this one is an 85 out of 100. Overall, what I learned is maybe these types of movies aren't for me, and I am never watching a 3.5-hour movie again in my entire life. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.